You are listening to the Airline Selection Podcast, where we bring you insights to help you succeed at airline selections. This podcast is brought to you by Airline Selection Program. Please welcome your host, airline captain and major airline recruiter, Guillaume Debauchez.
Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Airline Selection Podcast, where we bring you insights and specialist tips to help you succeed at your upcoming airline interviews. The knowledge and skills and attitudes that you will learn here will further help you on top of what we also have on our website and on our courses. All right, so today I'm happy to get you to meet our psychologist, Dana. Dana, how are you doing today?
Hi, Guillaume. Thank you so much. I'm doing fine. Maybe I can do a little bit of introduction if that's all right with you, because the others, maybe the audience hasn't met me before. So hello, everyone. I'm Dana. I'm the psychologist of the company, and you're going to meet me here in the podcast and also maybe at the 16 PF debriefing. And basically, in my work here in this company is going to be focused on pilot mental health and well-being, so that everyone in this high-performance environment can get the psychological care that you need.
And Dana, what's your background? I think you've got quite an aviation background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So also in my work history, you can find aviation-related topics, but I think something that started me on this journey was my family, because my dad worked as a pilot and my mom worked as a flight attendant. And even my grandfather was a pilot too. So this really pushed me into a certain direction, and I'm very happy that it did.
Yeah, so you understand the constraints that this career puts on our private lives, for instance, because you were the receiver of that, right?
Yes, definitely. Even though as a child, but yes, I can now see it even more clearly, especially with the psychological training that I received. Yes. So we can talk a little bit more about that today.
Exactly. It's something we'll definitely develop, because it's important for you to know everything there is to know about the airline pilot role as you ease into this career. And so the way we're going to run this second season is we will have several episodes, obviously, and they will go by theme. The first 3 are going to be about navigating stress in the pilot role. So because it's quite a lengthy subject, we will divide it into 3 parts. And the very first one today is going to be about the transition into flight training. Then after that, we'll talk in the second episode a bit more in depth about what happens at flight training, and then the stress in the pilot role that you get as a pilot in an airline. All 3 episodes will help you, even if you're just an ab-initio, to understand the different stages that you may go through and how stress will impact us as pilots. And believe me, stress does impact us as pilots. We need to learn how to manage it. And Dana is here to bring us some clinical insights from her experience on, what happens to a pilot when such situations happen. And of course, give us some hints and solutions on how to manage it best. Yes. Remember, it's important we want you to be a pilot with a good career, but also a happy pilot. So it's also about being able to navigate difficult times. Right. So how are we going to go about this, Dana, today?
Well, first, I just wanted to say that definitely our role here is not to deter you from this line of work, but just so that you know what to expect, so that you can prepare yourself for that. And we will also try to give you some tips and tricks on how to navigate this. But first, I think what I would like to ask you, Guillaume, is can you maybe tell me about the time when you have transitioned into flight training from the civilian life and you thought to yourself that, okay, this is actually way harder than I expected?
Yeah, so I'm someone who needs to work hard to get results. When I do, I get results. Some people are quick learners, and I was always amazed to see people who can learn things and execute them immediately. I'm not like that. So the very first experience I had of that was during the ATPL. I mean, I did very good academic studies. I then had a first career, which ended when I was 27 because I decided to become a pilot. So I went back to school and I went back to do a full ATPL. I did a modular ATPL, but I spent a whole year in person at an ATPL school in France. And I found that quite hard because A lot of the topics were unknown to me, so I had to relearn how to be at school again, and I wanted to be the best that I could be. And while I ended up being, one of the top 3 sort of in my class, it took a lot of work. The other ones were really smart and really quick, and so it was not a competition, but I wanted to perform. So I found, geez, this is hard. And before you start to master all the concepts, it takes a bit of time. And when you're at the ATPL theory, it's like, am I really going to use this? And then half the teachers tell you, well, actually, you're never going to use this. So it's kind of tough. Then afterwards, it was about choosing the right flight school. And I ended up, because I was already a little bit advanced in life, to choose a flight school that was close to where I lived, because I wasn't alone in my life. And I knew that this flight school wasn't necessarily the best, but I sort of thought, well, it doesn't really matter because I'll get the license anyway. And somehow there was always this lingering thought that, am I being trained properly? And that's something I know now, is that getting your pilot's license is a little bit like getting your high school degree, or your baccalaureate, as we call it in France. 90% of people get it, but there are very varying degrees between all those who get it. And I kind of put myself in a position, and it was subconscious, where I perhaps wasn't in the best place. So was I going to make it? And I realized it by the way they were organized, that the planes were not the best quality, that the instructors perhaps weren't all that motivated, and there was stress there. Am I doing this in the right place? Am I going to be in the right place? And then this developed into me later on of some sort of an imposter syndrome when I started to do when I did my first, when I prepared for my first selections. And I carried this for quite a while until I became an instructor, and then I became better. I did some gap training, which, as you know, we specialize in gap training. And there was one person doing gap training around Paris in those days. He changed my life, this guy, because I learned to fly the airplane in a professional manner, even though I hadn't been in an airline. And after he trained me, I thought, like, now I really, really know what I'm doing and what I'm supposed to do. And the imposter syndrome sort of left. And I ended up approaching my first real selection without really feeling it. But you see, it's like, and that's just my story. Others have other stories. My batchmate, he was 42. So he had other issues. He was very slow on the plane, for instance. And he ended up getting a job as well. But it's stressful, no doubt.
Yeah, that I can definitely imagine, especially because you're transitioning from a life that you're confident in your abilities, and then it's basically an identity crisis. You go into flight school, and then you have to decide who you want to be. You had an established identity, but now you have to create a new one, because there are new expectations. And you have a very different job. You have new people around you. So everything is a bit, it's this uncertainty I can feel.
And as well, during that time, you are sort of weak because you are a student and you don't yet have a job. You are not financially strong, and you're in a position, you're never really in control. So I remember after I became an instructor in the very early days, you are under supervision, I think, for the first 50 hours. And, before I launched into this career, I had quite a good first career, and I was traveling, in very good conditions, left and right in the world already when I was 25. I worked for a large telecommunications company, and I was, sort of, I felt respected by my employer, let's put it this way. And all of a sudden now I work at an aero club where I'm supposed to pull aircraft from hangars and fuel them, and I get told off if I make a mistake, and I get treated not so well, like I'm someone who knows nothing. And it was quite tough, that as well, until it felt like, until I make it into a decent airline, I'm not going to be looked at like I'm someone who ever matters. Who am I now? Like, when am I going to be myself?
Yes, that is definitely. Sorry.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something that you you can feel that you have to reinvent yourself. Also, it requires a higher level of independence because, well, there are not going to be the teachers who will tell you exactly what to do. Of course, you can rely on your instructors and peers, but still you have to manage your own academic way and also manage your own time, finances. So yeah, it's a lot to handle. Maybe if that's all right with you, I could tell you a little bit more about, for example, what are the common signs when someone experiences anxiety because of all of these.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was looking forward to that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I would say that there are, of course, a whole range of symptoms, but I could maybe highlight 3 of these. So, for example, there is the cognitive aspect that we have to talk about. This is when all the stress and anxiety, it leads to, let's say, you have maybe difficulty concentrating. You can make basic mistakes that you would not do otherwise, or you can get forgetful. Maybe you're overthinking everything. But of course, there is also a physical aspect of it, which, well, I think I'm also experiencing now. This is my first ever recording. You can have sweaty palms, racing heart, let's say muscle tension. That's something that I think, especially in my generation, we talk about a lot, how you have to unclench your jaw. I did not really realize that before someone told this to me. But definitely that, trouble sleeping, that's also something that a lot of people experience. And of course, there is an emotional side of it where you can feel that you're doubting yourself a lot, or you can be, your mood can be quite changeable. You can get irritated quite easily. And I think that it all comes with, it's necessary to have self-awareness, and you can realize what is happening to you, and that you have to do something with the situation and ask for help if that is something that you need.
Can you better define for us what is anxiety? Because you give us the symptoms, but what is it? I think I know what it is, but maybe you can give me your version, or the specialist's version.
Well, how I could connect it to our topic would be when you feel overwhelmed by circumstances, when you don't feel that you're in control. For example, one thing that I wanted to mention today is that there's this certain theory in psychology which talks about the optimal stress. And I think that's also something that pilots talk about a lot. How stress is necessary for our life, and it's always there to certain degrees. But we need to have an optimal stress level to improve ourselves, because that can actually help us. So that is why anxiety can help us to develop ourselves or push our limits. But if that stress level becomes too much, then that just impairs any kind of function that we have.
But am I mistaken? My understanding is that stress and anxiety are 2 different things. In my understanding was that anxiety was fear of the future, fear of the unknown. Anxiety is a form of fear. Like you feel that you're losing control, or that you feel that you have all the symptoms that you described because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, because you don't know whether you're going to make it. And it's this fear of the future that is technically called anxiety. Am I wrong here?
No, I think that's also definitely part of it. I think that the one thing that I could highlight here is that stress is all around us. We're handling it every single day. But when you have anxiety, it's when you don't know if you can handle it. That's definitely something that can be future focused. You can even get anxious, let's say, when you're taking a test, even though you have taken that before, or I'm not sure, going to the dentist. Everyone has experienced that before. But again, you just don't know if you can handle it again. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yes. So because my definition was really around fear, and then stress is something that happens that could be unrelated, in the sense that you could have stress. You need stress just to get up from bed in the morning, right? And you need stress to perform your tasks. And if you have a right, like you said, the optimal stress, and that's, I think, what we learned in during the human factors part of the ATPL, is that when you have an optimal level of stress, this is where you can focus the best. So you're attentive. It is linked to your attention. But if you have too little, you tend to not pay attention, so you could miss stuff. And if you have too much, then your bucket is full, and you everything spills over, and you're not able to focus on anything. But
Yes.
it's not because you've got too much to do that you could become anxious. Maybe can you clear that one up for us? Or maybe it is.
Okay. Sorry, I might have
Okay. If you have an optimal stress level, are you sort of anxious? Are you, or is it just normal? First of all, is stress is normal. Stress is a normal response to life happening, right?
Definitely, yes.
Okay, and anxiety is also a normal response. Some people have it more than others. And if you have too much of it, then it can impair you from functioning normally. That's
Yes, and also I think another important part of it is that it's there for a prolonged time. So because if we are just stressed, then we can deal with that, and that's the end of the story. But if we have anxiety, that can go on for a longer period of time, and that is when things get a bit more complicated.
Yeah, so that's what I was getting at, because I feel that there could be a short-term anxiety on an exam, but there could be also a long-lasting anxiety. And I think that's more the one that the pilots are experiencing when they get through flight training. They get constant anxiety for a long period of time until they finally succeed in an airline that they like enough to want to stay there. Right. Well, now that we've set the sort of the scene around navigating stress and anxiety, and that the two are linked together, that you do need it to function, that getting too much could impair you to function, that they are also both normal responses, but they need to be dealt with. So what's the next thing that we were going to talk about today?
So exactly the thing that I wanted to ask you about is, there are certain moments when your anxiety just really concentrates on one part, and maybe it can be, let's say, a stressful period for a short time. For example, when you're being evaluated, that is also something where you know that it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you might be dreading it for quite some time, but then right before the evaluation, or when you're right there, can you maybe tell me, have you ever felt something like that when you have been evaluated?
But this is not. This could be valid for all 3 episodes. But the closest remembrance I have of this is actually when as an already established pilot. In fact, I mean, when you go through flight school, you don't have that many exams. In fact, you have an exam towards the end of your CPL, and you have an exam to the end of your IRME, and then the one at the MCC is everybody passes that. But when you become a pilot in an airline, there you have exams every 6 months in the form of sim checks that last for 2 days each time. And depending on the airline where you're at, which can be fairly constructive when it comes to training, or more severe when it comes to training, which training becomes checking, when there is something at stake, such as you keeping your job at the end of a sim check, you become anxious. And this is very much comes from, it's very much a culture thing. I know, for instance, at Air France, from speaking with my friends, or at BA for having been there for 7 years, there is not so much of that. The training is very constructive. You're here to learn. Of course, you're expected to have worked before, but you kind of know that you're going to get out of this sim check with your job still intact. Going to the Middle East is very different. And this would start induce anxiety when, for instance, you see others fail. People who you don't know how good they are, but you assume that they've passed the selection, so they're just as good as you. And when one day invariably you have a bad day, and then after that you think about it, you pass, but you think about it for next time, and you go like, oh, am I losing my mojo, so to say? Am I losing my special thing? So as pilots, we are always being put under the grill all the time, regularly. And this is a long-term anxiety. Now, of course, when you finish your sim check, you go back on the line and then you feel quite good for quite a few months. But very quickly, the next 5 months lapse, and then you're back again working in your books to study for the sim check. So you have to sort of live with that. And no profession is more regulated than ours in that. Even surgeons, who play with pilots' lives, and others don't have as much scrutiny as we do.
Yeah, I can imagine that in this kind of scenario, it's hard to even admit if you're struggling, because you said that, for example, your peers, maybe you think that they are even better than you and they are failing. So I can imagine that there is this imposter syndrome that you have talked about before, that you're here in this very new kind of setting. You don't know how good the other people are. You don't know exactly what is the level that they're expecting of you, if you can pass that. And maybe you can also think that you're just one mistake away from being detected that you should not be there. What do you think? Could we change this kind of sorry?
For me, I think the imposter syndrome was true until I succeeded at a major airline. After that, still for a little while, I went like, did I really deserve this? But come a point, you worked so hard. You clearly worked in the right direction. And come a point, I sort of felt validated. Now, basically, British Airways told me, yes, you belong here. What you've done was good enough by our standards. And so my imposter syndrome stopped there. Come a point after being an experienced co-pilot, I didn't have an imposter syndrome wondering whether I could be a captain. I was anxious whether I was gonna, whether I was gonna pass the course, because it was a very hard course at Emirates. But there was no imposter syndrome. No, for me, it stopped really at the time of this big interview, because the main worry I had about being an imposter was whether my training was sufficient, whether I had not skimmed on something that I shouldn't have skimmed on. So like I said, this got kind of dealt with during the gap training that I did. But still, until you're actually validated, you kind of wonder whether they're gonna see through you, and the stuff that you don't want to mention, whether they're gonna actually see it. Yeah.
And do you think that maybe we could change this kind of culture so that people feel more, that they can open up about what is happening to them?
Well, so here now we're talking more about getting people to say when they're struggling. I also during flight training had better and worse flights. Honestly, during flight school, although my flight school, like I said, I wasn't very confident with them. I think I was kind of on schedule. I didn't really experience that. But I know for now, working often and going at ATOs, I see students all the time. Probably students just like those who are watching at the moment. And some of them speak to me during the break, and I can see that they are struggling. And they are struggling because they had a bad flight or a bad couple of flights in a row, and maybe an instructor who was harsh on them. And, they don't know how to deal with it. And they feel that they feel this imposter syndrome. They also feel a big crisis of confidence. And for all of them, in fact, who've spoken to me like this, and just because I was an experienced pilot who was there for them, and all we did was just sit down and talk, and it kind of was enough to get them to break through and get remotivated, and then all of them are now sat in flight deck. I remember one in particular who she was a very pleasant person, but she'd been badly affected by the attitude of an instructor who had been very old-fashioned and harsh, and she told me she was going to give up. And right now she's flying, I believe, for SAS. So it's often just takes admitting it, speaking about it. It doesn't take that much to get out of a hole,
Yes, well, as you mentioned, having someone who has more experience and them telling you the stories about how they have struggled, but they have overcome it, I think that also counts a lot. It's just to have this open dialogue with people who you can think about them as mentors, for example, but even, of course, with your peers.
Yes, and I was speaking with, this series is derived from some articles that are on our website that were co-written between you and Rebecca, who she's the lead creator of our operational procedures course, a course that I recommend that you take a look at. And she was saying, it's fine to take some time and to not always compare yourself to others. For instance, when I was telling her, well, when if you take more than 10 hours to go solo, maybe people could sort of question whether they are good enough. And she was like, well, there are some people who take 15 hours, 20 hours to go solo. They needed to get through a blockage, and now they're flying at an airline. So and then I went like, actually, that's true. I went solo quite quickly, but then it took me, I think, 62 hours to complete my PPL because I was changing aero clubs all the time, and I wasn't applied, and somehow I wasn't very good as a private pilot. I mean, most people aren't. It really takes you going through the CPL to really get some skill and be in control of what you're doing. But I would say I was an under average PPL. So it's not because you have a slow start in something, and it could happen to you at the beginning of the CPL. You could be below the curve of what normal progression is. Just so long, all you can do is do what is in front of you. Work, constantly work. Work through struggles, work through success. Continue to put in the work regularly. You cannot control what life has in store for you. You can control what's in front of you. And be in the present and do your best in the present. That's the only thing you can control.
I definitely agree with that. Yes. Also, just what this made me, what you reminded me of something that it's so important to remember of what you did right before, so that because you got here from, let's say, if you think back where you were a couple of years ago, you overcame all of those hurdles, and you can overcome the next one too. There is this little tip that I would like to give. It's a personal favorite of mine. I personally keep a positive folder in my computer. Every time I do something right, every time I get a good feedback or an achievement, I save it. So anytime that I struggle with something and I don't think that I can do it, I just look at that, because that is proof how far I've come. And I think that you could try that too.
Yes, you could try that. You can try also gratitude lists, anything that is, that's positive, because at the end of the day, if you've put the right level of energy into your work and into the universe, if you're the best person that you can be in your personal life, come a point, things are going to turn around. And if you're going through a bad patch, come a point, the universe is going to look after you. And I'm a big believer of that. I've been through ups and downs in life. My career has been good, although at the end it ended. But it's also because I wanted to get back to France and I had family issues to deal with. But there's just so much you can control. But what you really can control is the present moment. And if right now you're struggling as you're watching this video, just focus on your next flight. Do your best for your next flight. And if even that doesn't work perfectly, that's fine. Continue and work for the next. And that's one day you'll get this click, just like I did after my PPL. At some point during my CPL training, I did a really good CPL actually. Because I had a really good instructor. It only took a really good instructor. Well, the reason I was not so good in my PPL is I changed instructors a lot, and it was in an aero club, so it was associative and not professional. But the day I got an excellent instructor in CPL, he changed my life. He's changed everything for me. Sometimes it just takes one encounter, one person to get something to click in your mind. Until you meet that person, you'll never know what your future can be. So for this, you need to turn up in your life one day at a time. And
exactly. And until then, consider even if you would call them failures, consider all of those as an opportunity, I would say. That's because right. those things, even if you can't do 100% of what you wanted to give, that just brings you closer to your goal. That's an important part to remember.
Good. Well, there were quite a lot of things I'm looking on our notes here that we wanted to talk about. One of them is financial stress, which piles up on every pilot. It's something that it's a very hot topic for us because we know that it's the case. You get through flight training and then you arrive at the end, and invariably the amount of money you thought you would spend has has increased by 10 to 20% just because, well, you didn't realize that housing was so expensive. You maybe didn't factor in your living and travel costs accurately. Maybe you had to do a few extra flights for this or that reason. Maybe you had to stay on site for 1 more month because the weather was bad where you were. Or maybe you didn't budget for your gap training, which is, again, that's what we do. It makes a huge difference in how you're going to be able to transform this investment into something that works for you. And a lot of people are surprised they have to do a type rating, but we recommend that you do this because this will set you apart and get you to a job quicker. All of this financial strain is there when you sign the loan. Most people have to go through a loan. If you do, well, you sign the papers, but when the date of the first repayment starts to come, then the stress really piles on, and then your environment and your family is the people who co-sign this loan, or maybe your spouse or whoever will start to go like, hey, we need to make money now. Money needs to come in. And if by that time you've not managed to land a job in an airline, then likely you're going to be pushed by your family to get a job somewhere else, which I recommend if you have to do that, you still keep it in aviation somewhere at an airport, one way or another. But this can be very stressful, which is why we really meditate heavily for you succeeding, getting that first job fast. And this is why you don't want to waste opportunities. It's really the mission that we have is to reduce the anxiety that we've been talking about by getting you through that first door and succeeding at your interviews first thing. So you don't either have yet another bigger problem, which is, geez, now I failed one. Am I now having a bigger imposter syndrome in the next one? I didn't get validated. Now maybe I wasn't meant to do this after all. Maybe what my family is telling me that I should go and work in another area, maybe they're right. All of this is a terrible state of mind to be in. And if it usually doesn't happen after the first failure. I find that people fail once, then on the second one, their family is still behind them and but if they fail twice, now, time has passed, and now people around them will try and give them the good advice of, hey, it's okay. Maybe you should think of doing something else, which is terrible. I mean, I know for me, it happened to me after I failed Air France. And I remember my father-in-law, who I didn't like very much, he told me, yeah, you should maybe go back to your old career. And I went like, I'm going to show you. My ego helped me because it remotivated me. But I know that if I had failed again, come a point, it would have weighed on me, And I meet very courageous pilots who come come and meet us after 2 or 3 failures, and they're still fighting. And then they get through our gap training, and then most of them end up succeeding on the first attempt after they come with us, sometimes at the second attempt. But it takes how much pain, and how much unnecessary pain, because being anxious is painful, So, sorry, I've spoken for a long time now. I thought discussing about financial strain was quite important in this episode.
Yes, definitely. That also has a lot of it as just an additional strain on yourself. But honestly, everything that you highlighted, I could not agree more.
Good. Should we wrap it up, Dana, and we'll highlight some further points in the next episode?
Yeah, that sounds very nice.
Okay, it was lovely to speak with you. And well, everybody who is here, it was nice to have you as an audience. We'll see you in the next episode.
Okay, perfect.
Bye-bye.
See you.
This podcast was brought to you by Airline Selection Program, a company that is focused on helping you succeed at airline selections. Our flagship course, Advanced Interview Course, has helped hundreds of pilots just like you become successful. Visit our website at online.airlineselectionprogram.com and find out how you too can get the job of your dreams.